Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Pastor John here. Got another group of guys with me here today. Actually, we just kind of subbed Pastor Drew out for Vicar Scott.
All right.
We'll find out really quick if that was a good sub or a good trade or not.
Going for the looks.
Yeah.
That's right. The young looks.
Just wanted to start off by thanking you guys for watching the last video. I saw a number of you were able to watch that. Thank you for texting your questions. I hope these discussions have been beneficial to you, and I hope this week's discussion is still beneficial to you. A number of you texted in questions, both following the sermons this last weekend, but also throughout the week. I got a bunch of text messages after people finished watching the debate and things like that, which was awesome. These guys will have a great time trying to answer some of those questions. But let's get right down to it. Tom, I'm going to ask you the first question then.
Sweet.
We got a bunch of different texts mentioning actually abortion as the most important thing for Christians, just kind of asking if that should be the most important thing. I'm just going to read part of one of the texts we got. One said, my reasoning in making a voting decision is if the candidate or the party believes it is okay to kill babies in the womb. This, for me, is a reason not to vote for the person or the party. For them, that act was the most barbaric sin of all mankind. And I said, thanks for the feedback on this. So just maybe the question that would be, so how do we as Christians kind of approach this abortion topic?
Well, I'm glad we started with a softball question. Jeez. Is there anything easier to get warmed up? Go right to World War III. Appreciate that, John. In my message on Sunday, when I wasn't busy messing up Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and King Darius and King Nebuchadnezzar, I talked a little bit, real briefly on this, and I guess I'd like to expand on it a little bit. I talked about how I think we've bought into this notion that when it comes to a particular issue, like abortion or capitalism or health insurance or whatnot, that the most important thing is how we vote on that. And don't hear me wrong, I'm not saying it's not important. I think it is important how we vote on it. In fact, I said if life is your number one issue, then vote that way. But don't stop there. I think this is where we have fallen short, especially in the area of life, that being pro-life is more than just 9 months in the womb. But what are we doing to help a mother who has an unexpected pregnancy, who really doesn't have any hope for their child? Whether or not, that's their fault or they're in this situation on their own, let's put all of that aside. But what are we doing as the church to help that person see hope for the child that they are impregnated with? How many of us take the initiative to be willing to adopt? Whoa. What if every Christian in the United States said, you know what, this is so important to me that I'm not only going to vote a particular way, but I'm also going to be willing to adopt a child? What kind of a message would that send into the world? And when you look at the idea of just voting this particular way, I've actually heard friends of mine, and this might blow some of you away, who have said, we've actually voted for a candidate who is not pro-life because we believe that some of their other policies will actually lead to fewer abortions. Because some of their other policies, maybe financial policies or stuff around welfare or whatnot, will actually make it easier for women who find themselves with unexpected pregnancies to go ahead and have that child instead of just getting rid of it. Maybe one of you all can piggyback on that to make sure I said that clearly. I just think it's a very challenging issue in terms of how do we think of this politically, that it's maybe not quite as black and white as it's often made out to be. And this is coming from a guy who life is a huge issue for me. When I look at all the issues that we're talking about, that one is often at the top of it for me, just because I do believe that the law is incorrect, but it's not just enough to overturn that law if we as Christians aren't coming behind it and beside it to make sure that those folks who find themselves in hard situations have a way out and are actually cared for and see hope, and that there's hope for the rest of the life their child, not just those 9 months.
Yeah. In fact, Tom, it's interesting as you were talking about that. I think about myself. I grew up in a household that's what we were, right? We were pro-life. No matter what, you voted for the pro-life candidate, and that was the most important issue. And I think one of the things that I learned as I've had some friends in my life who kind of challenged me on some of those things, and along the same line, Tom, that you're talking about. What I've learned is, in fact, one that was a mentor of mine said exactly what Tom said. That there's more to life than 9 months. And if you think about life and the whole thing, how do we take care of our elderly, our widows, our orphans? How do we take care of it? Like a one that was really big and talked about was the Syrian refugees. Right? You talk about life, and I mean, abortion's barbaric. But so is what's going on with Syrian refugees going on in our country right now, right? And it's easy sometimes for us to ignore one thing and to really value another thing. But I think we have to have a bigger view of life. And so I've been really challenged on that too, because it's easy to come back and say, you know what, if I voted right, and then they'll pass the right laws, then I don't have to do anything. But I think the ones that I really see as pro-life are the ones who get involved. And they're the ones that make a habit of doing that. I look at Mary Lehman on staff, who is such a champion for life, not just saying it. She's down in New Life Family Services and working with their boards and telling stories and giving financially and all those kind of things. And she sees a bigger picture within the issue. And I think part of it is we've got to see a bigger picture if we really want to protect life as a whole, all the way across from womb all the way to death. That we got to get involved on a bigger level, and instead of just saying, okay, it's just a vote, it's just about a vote, and once I do that, then I'm good, and I can tell all my friends I really value life because on November 9th I cast the vote on that platform, and I just don't think it's that. It's not only that. It's not that simple, but I don't think that's very helpful.
Yeah. I think another thing that's helpful is just to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And one thing that's been important just for me is traveling around the world to see different countries and how different people live, and that they're real people. I think it's too easy to make people or children, abortions, refugees, or whatever into statistics. But they're real people. Right. All of them are real people who we as the church are called to love from beginning to end. And certainly that's complicated along the way, because we're all complicated people, and you know how that goes. But the more we can put ourselves into other people's shoes, into their situation, what it must be like to maybe have 2 other kids. And when we were in Ethiopia, I was in a person's home, and she had 3 children, and her husband just disappeared. And his job was a daily laborer anyway, so he was making like 15 cents a day, something like that. But now he's just gone, so here's this lady with 3 kids in a 10 by 10 house, trying to figure out how do I do this. Now imagine if she found herself pregnant then in that situation. The easy thing to do would be, well, you're not married, how could you let that happen, or why did you have more kids, and all of that. But until you're sitting in that home with her and hearing her story, it just changes the situation, changes the way that you perceive things, and you go, okay, how can I maybe now enter into this person's life to bring some hope to her and to her kids. I mean, one of them was 3 months old that she was holding in her arms, and it breaks your heart. So yeah, remembering that statistics are real people.
I feel like that goes back to what you were saying last week. I'm actually jumping back to last week's video where you were talking about the difference between being Christian and taking the moral high ground. It's easy, like you said, to point fingers and say, oh, you slept around and you get what's coming to you. But it's hard to take the stance of forgiveness and mercy and to love your neighbor when they find themselves in a difficult time. So we would all probably agree here that we're categorically against killing an infant in the womb or killing anyone for that matter. but because God values life, we value life too. But we should live our lives in a Christian way, not in a moral high ground kind of way. Live in the same mercy that Christ had for us.
Yeah, and realize, I mean, you guys have all said it, that takes a lot of thought, and it's not going to be easy. It's not necessarily going to be black and white, and that's both how we live our lives, but also something I think both of you guys mentioned is something you really actually got to think about when it comes to the voting booth. Don't just take a sentence and say, okay, that means this about a candidate, but instead it means you got to actually do your research and see what candidates are standing for and things like that. So, sorry, I didn't start with a softball question, and you guys don't have any
One last thing.
Yeah.
I'll just reiterate that I said Sunday. If this is your number one issue when it comes to voting, then fine. Vote that way if that's where your conscience and faith is leading you. But don't stop there. Take that next step. Any of us can give you a place where you can go and volunteer or serve that helps bring to light these life issues where you can, in a tangible way, come beside someone who's struggling with these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're going to come back to that whole refugee and immigrant topic a little bit later, but Derek, I'm going to just read you straight a text that somebody sent in around the time of the debate, and I'm going to let you kind of interpret where this person was coming from. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Yeah.
I'll just apologize right
Yeah,
apologize now for misquoting it, I'm sure.
but the person texted in and said, "Is God using Trump to be the foolish things of the world to confound the wise being unbelievers?"
So I wonder what they think about Trump. So obviously they're quoting scripture in the midst of this. I think the hard thing, and I think we do this a lot, and I think we have to be very careful in how we take scripture and use it, especially for political means. We will take a verse like this, and I think there's probably some liberties that are being taken. Particularly what this verse is talking about. And this verse is really talking about the heart of salvation. And so in the midst of this, you have Jesus who's talking to a divided church, right, in Corinthians, and saying, hey, okay, let's make sure we're focused on the right things. So it's not, we're taking a church thing and we're making it a political thing, and I think we've got to be very careful with that. His biggest thing was, hey, let's not be divided, let's make sure that we're in the same path. We're about salvation, what salvation's all about. And even the famous verse, right? Some follow Apollos, and some follow Trump, and some follow Hillary.
Does anybody follow either?
Not according to anyone's yards, but the key thing was talking about what are we about? What are we about? As far as getting, does he use the wise of the world to make fools? So I think he uses. We all fall into that category at times, right? Where he's used us, and particularly looking at that verse where he talks about the journey, right? The journey of maturity in life. And so there were things that at one time seemed wise but became foolish as you matured in your faith and walked through that. And I think we've all kind of experienced those kind of things. I think he uses tons of experiences to help that in. Does he use specific people? Absolutely. But at the same time, I know he's used me, who's been a fool at times, to help other people along too. And I love the thing, he does it all the time, right? He uses the weak things in such powerful and wonderful ways, which is a great thing is when you're looking at a disciple, right, walking this line, is he will use us in some of our most terrible and awful moments. I don't know if I ever would want to run for president and come under the scrutiny and the backbiting that they do. I mean, I can't imagine what my family would go through in the midst of that. And I'm sure at times it would bring out the worst in me. I would hope it maybe bring out the best in me, but you have the whole nation talking about you, and I'm not trying to justify anything that he has said or Hillary said, but I mean, what it does do for me is it drives me to the importance that we've got to be praying for anyone that we're putting into a potential leadership, and that they would, first of all, and we have this challenge every morning, right, is the first thing to do is turn and say, okay, God, please don't let me lead today, let you lead today. May it be your agenda and your stuff. Because I know in my life, when I start to lead, man, am I foolish. Time and time again. So for me, it drives me back to the fact that I got to be on my knees, not only for God to lead me every day, but for our leaders as well. And I'm just not smart enough to know how God's timing and people and plans all come together. All I know is He is using everything for His plan, and I have a great peace about that.